Hello again, everybody. Ben Drofsky here. We're calling this Tucker and Ted Thursday, and here's why. I got the great Bushra Amiwala waiting on deck to come on. She's talking about her running for office in the 9th Congressional District on the, I was going to say the north side of Chicago, but it's north of Chicago. I used to say the North Shore, but it actually stretches to the west. Is Skokie in the North Shore? Quick. Let's do a geography lesson before we start the interview. Before I get started, I just want to say something that's really on my mind right now. First of all, number one, folks, I am doing this on a cell phone. I apologize. My computer crashed. Bushra told me it's not a crash, that in fact the computer is rehealing itself. I have no idea what this computer is doing. I'm sick of computers. If I could do away with computers, ladies and gentlemen, I would do away computers. Bushra's laughing. She said, Gen Z listening to a boomer rant and rave. All right. I always want to say something about Tucker and Ted before I move on. Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz, they had debates all over the internet, and lefties are loving it, man. Man, lefties are just loving this debate. And I have to laugh at the way how much lefties love this debate. Number one, they love it because it's a fight on MAGA. So anytime MAGA is fighting among itself, they're not destroying lefties, which is like a good thing for lefties. So I can understand and relate to that, lefties. As I kind of liked it on that level too. Number two, Tucker Carlson. How do I put this? I kind of put this in a way that it just says exactly what I want to say. Uh, Tucker Carlson, as hard as this believes, articulates a point that's almost logical. It is logical. And what he is doing was forcing Texas Senator, MAGA Republican, Ted Cruz to come face to face with the illogic, the utter illogic of supporting U.S. intervention in an insane war. Well, all wars to one degree or another are insane. But the particular war where Israel started bombing Iran and then Iran countered by firing missiles at Israel is, in my humble opinion, an own variation of insanity in war, because the notion is somehow or other Iran, by virtue of the fact that it's building a nuclear bomb, is worse than all the other countries in the world that have nuclear bombs. And it goes back, it harkens back to a day and age where we view ourselves, we being the United States, we view ourselves as pure and good, and everybody else is evil. Even if the thing we have is evil in and of itself, which is a nuclear bomb, which, with all the bombs we've created in the world, ladies and gentlemen, could blow up the world several times. So why is it a particular catastrophe if Iran has a nuclear bomb, as opposed to, I don't know, name all the countries with nuclear bombs: North Korea, Israel, France, Russia, United States, England. I'm losing Pakistan, India. Here you go. That's some insanity right there. India and Pakistan are rivals right next to each other. Each have nuclear bombs. Why don't we just bomb Pakistan and India? I'm not doing that as a suggestion, ladies and gentlemen. I'm merely saying that to point out the irrational part of this. Like, somehow or other, we're good and Iran is bad. So we're going to go bomb Iran. Or we're going to support Israel while it bombs Iran. And to his credit, Tucker Carlson pointed out the illogic of this position. Tucker Carlson is an American firster. He doesn't want any intervention, and he certainly doesn't want Americans going to fight it in Iran. And I applaud him for taking that position. I, too, have that position. I had that position back in the day when Bush was like 3, and I was against the United States bombing Afghanistan after 9/11. So what the right has done is take the worldview of lefties, and they're articulating it now, even though they have been manipulating all the fears and all the prejudices and all the biases that this country has about people who look differently than us for all these years to justify all kinds of wars. And now all of a sudden they've discovered their inner Noam Chomsky. And I'm on one level I like it, and the other level I'm like, it's kind of upsetting. I mean, it's just because I think about the last 20 years, and Tucker Carlson was nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. at all, at any time. If anything, when he was at Fox, he was manipulating the attitudes, prejudice against people like Noam Chomsky. I think the right has done more to scare people with the concept of the lefty or leftist radicals or leftist socialists than they have even, or almost as much as, Iran. They've stirred fears of Iran. So all of a sudden I'm supposed to be jubilant because this man who has been preaching the most toxic form of prejudice and bias and hate is having a moment of rational thought. I don't know, folks. Okay, I'll take it. You don't have much choice. And by the way, Tucker Carlson, you are absolutely right to point out the inconsistencies, the illogic of, and the ignorance of Ted Cruz. You could do that with Ted Cruz on any issue. You could do that with Ted Cruz on immigration. You guys have promoted this notion that somehow or other immigration is a threat to the United States when it's not a threat at all. You have somehow promoted the notion that it's a crisis at the border when there is no crisis at all. You have somehow or other promoted the notion that we shouldn't have an open border. Like, capital goes, as I always point out, freely from Mexico to the United States and back and forth. Why can't people? Why can't you have just a logical flow of people? They come into the United States, they work, they go back to Mexico. Why? Why have you spent the last 10 years of your life, Tucker Carlson, scaring Americans with the notion that somehow or other is a threat that people from Latin America are coming here? But now all of a sudden, you're trying to wake Americans up to the fact that they've been brainwashed, that Iran is somehow a threat. You pick and choose. You know, there's that old line that people used to say, my Catholic friends would say, Ben, I'm a cafeteria Catholic. I pick and choose elements of the theology that I'm going to follow. Well, Tucker, you're a cafeteria logician. You pick and choose the logical stuff you're going to orate. And then tomorrow you go back to the utter madness of 90% of your agenda. But I'll take it. I will take it, folks. Anything we can do to stop the slaughter, anything we can do to stop more war, I will embrace. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox and bring on Bushra. Bushra, welcome to the show. You're a first time, a rookie to the Ben Joravsky Show, so welcome to the show.
Thank you, rookie indeed. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yes, and before I get started, shout out Moise Bawani. He's the one who hooked us up. Good friend of the show, the great Moise Bawani. Very astute guy on every issue except for basketball, but we'll leave that alone. Bushra, you're running for Congress in the 9th Congressional, and we've talked a lot about this race in the past. Mostly, we focused on this race, talking about the fact that so much of it is in Evanston and also goes into Wilmette, but there's portions that go into Skokie as well, and that's your hometown. So why don't you start off by introducing yourself, talking a little bit about who you are and how you got to this point at a very early age, a very young age, to be running for Congress, and then we'll get to the geographical aspects of the 9th itself. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Ben, for having me. And I'm glad that we're going to touch on the geography and the demographic composition of this district, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it because, one, it's changed so much in the past, even at 20 odd years, and it's been gerrymandered and redistricted. So my name is Bushra Amiwala. I'm very happy to be here today. I was born and raised in the north side of Chicago to two Pakistani immigrants, and we moved to Skokie when I was 9 years old. I always say it was the disparity between the two education systems I saw growing up that really became a guiding principle for me. For me, at literally 9 years old, seeing that 3 miles north from my original home, I suddenly have access to quality of this education system that is so net different is something that really stuck with me. That being said, I put myself through college. I went to DePaul University for undergrad and got FAFSA and every scholarship you could think of. I was a community service scholar at DePaul University. Shout out to DePaul. I studied information systems and had a double minor in community service studies and public policy studies. So I jokingly say I majored in something my parents would be cool with and minored in what I was actually interested in and passionate about. I had a ton of internships all throughout undergrad and found myself working 5 jobs at a given point to support my family, but also support myself through college. Did everything from coaching debate at my former high school, was a debate champion at Niles North. So it was cool to continue that legacy, to some type of corporate internship, to everything from also field work and legislative canvassing that sometimes paid as well extra on the weekends. So from there, I graduated in 2020. I was a pandemic grad. Fun fact, I actually was the commencement speaker for my university, but because we didn't have a formal celebration, we had a Zoom graduation. I will find any opportunity to remind people that I had that chance as well. And I've spent the past 5 years working at Google as a consultant with our government and nonprofit customers and a wide range of other groups too. And I've served on a board of education in Skokie. I was elected in April 2019 as one of the first Gen Z elected officials in the country, which is really exciting to be able to say. And I've now been reelected since then, been on the board for 7 years. Can't wait to talk about some of the cool things we've been able to do on the school board and what I've learned about governance work too. And I just graduated with my MBA from Kellogg Northwestern School of Management, which is also in district. So just a fun fact that I guess it's in my backyard, that institution and university. And those are just quick tidbits about me. I'm really excited to chat more about the things that drive me, fuel me, excite me. But we absolutely should touch on the demographics and the geographic composition of Illinois 9th as well.
Yeah, let's do that right now. So again, Skokie, ladies and gentlemen, people listen to this show know I love Skokie very dearly. There's like, I really don't know when it comes to geography, Bushra. I have very limited knowledge in the world as a whole, but also in the Chicago area. I don't get around all much. Don't leave the city, the city itself. But I do know Skokie, and I do know Evanston, my beloved Evanston, which I love very dearly. And that's about pretty much it. I kind of know Wilmette a little bit, not that much. So why don't you give folks an idea of exactly what the dimensions of the 9th Congressional District are, and just the diversity of it. You mentioned the diversity of it, the different towns, the different people, different incomes, etc. Go.
Absolutely. So Illinois 9th makes up of the 49th, 50th, 40th ward of Chicago and a tiny sliver of the 47th ward as well. So those are the Chicago areas that are encompassed. And then it's all of Evanston, all of Skokie, Lincolnwood, Niles, Morton Grove, Glenview, tiny bit of Northbrook, not much of Wilmette anymore, by the way. So that's changed as much as it used to. Not much of Winnetka as it once was either. So definitely the North Shore borderlines, thread lines are changing. And then like Niles, Morton Grove, as mentioned, and it strims all the way to tiny bit of Arlington Heights, tiny part of Buffalo Grove. And it goes all the way to a large chunk of Crystal Lake, which for context is over an hour drive from Skokie, purely based on miles because of how geographically far Crystal Lake is here. So that means it's parts of Cook, McHenry, and Lake County that are encompassed and represented in this district. And that's just the geographic composition. And when it comes to demographic makeup, let's start with Skokie because I'm a huge Skokie fan as well. So quick history lesson, which Ben, you probably might not need this, but just for old time's sake, after the Holocaust, many of the people who survived settled in now what is called Israel, about 70 to 80%. The remaining 20 to 30% that came to the States settled in what is called Skokie, Illinois. And this is a fact. And I lead with this because Skokie has one of the first Holocaust museums in the country, and acknowledging the historical roots of what makes up Skokie, which not only is geographically in the center and the heart of this district, but so many people who live in other parts of this district as well have roots and ties to the area of Skokie. So that's why not only was it a huge deal that I got elected in Skokie because of my age and being Gen Z, but it also from like a faith standpoint was showing this new age and tide and shift in the people that make up of Skokie as well. That being said, even when it comes to now, we see white flight. We see people moving to more affluent, upper middle class neighboring suburbs. And while that's happening, we see the integration of Section 8 housing, which typically brings Black and brown families. We see an aging, retiring population, which brings in more newer, younger families because Skokie has really good schools. And so we're seeing the demographic shift so quickly in Illinois 9 that actually it's safe to say this is a white minority district. We know that Arab Americans are still counted as white in census and other demographic collections data. They won't be moving forward, but they were if we look at 2020. And Skokie and Lincoln would have the largest Assyrian demographic as well, meaning the Arab Christian group. And I only acknowledge this because these are tidbits and nuances that you wouldn't know about Illinois 9, even with a quick Google search. These are things that you can acknowledge that the first Assyrian American Heritage Center is in Lincolnwood, in district. So this is the depth of nuance and the type of people that make up of Illinois 9 that I am so passionate about knowing and understanding the ins and outs of, because before we even get to issues, we have to start here.
And one of the things I've noticed about immigrant groups as they come to the United States and settle in and work their way up the economic ladder is that they often become more conservative. And this is across the board, excuse me, Bushra, across the board, all immigrants, but it's something they have in common, which is why it's so bizarre, weird, and twisted, among many other reasons, that the modern day Republican Party would turn on immigrants, because I would think that as they climb that ladder, they would be natural Republicans. And so, in terms of the demographic makeup of the district you described, why are you running as a Democrat? Why aren't you running as a Republican?
It's a great question. It's an 80% blue district. It is a very blue district. It's a safe blue district, but that doesn't mean that people that have Republican ideals and interests aren't going to try to play and buy a candidate in this race either. And those are the beliefs that I actually affiliate with. So my very first political experience ever, I took an AP government and politics class my senior year of high school. Got to mention the AP. And the end of that class, we were given two possible internship opportunities to choose from. Both were for a high-profile U.S. Senate race in Illinois. And this was, again, for context, the summer of 2016. One was paid, the other was not. I went the paid route, and that happened to be to work for then U.S. Senator at the time, Senator Mark Kirk. And through that class, I always wanted to get a firsthand look of what it meant to be Republican. And my job was to go door to door to various registered Republican voters' homes and ask them a series of 5 questions. And later the Kirk team would shape their stances on these policy issues based on the information we were collecting. There were quite a few things that came out of that. But the very first question on that list was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fearsome are you of an Islamic terror attack on U.S. soil? That was the first question we had to ask.
Wait, so you would go door to door, and you would see someone like me, Benny, hi, and you go, I'm here for Mark Kirk.
Yeah.
By the way, he's Republican. Youngsters who may not remember the name, Mark Kirk used to be a Republican senator from Illinois, and a big fan of charter schools. We'll get into that in a little while. So you would go, and that would be your first question?
Question number 1.
And
then it'd be like,
was it challenging for you as a Muslim to ask that question?
I mean, it goes without saying, but I think the first time I thought it was a joke. I thought I was being punked. And this was the time when we had like the Republican version of Van on our phones. So we're like refreshing this not user-friendly app. And I'm like, maybe there are typos here. But the discomfort wasn't in asking the question. The discomfort was in receiving the response, which uniquely across the board was 10. Very fearsome.
Dang.
And
What year was this?
This was in 2016. This was during the time that we saw the GOP party and the Trump administration and Trump campaign at the time really champion anti-immigrant, anti-Islamic, anti-human rhetoric, and it was picking up traction. And for people to say 10, very fearsome, and me obviously standing at their front porch was not helping that fear in any which way. But then it went on to the point where I was intrinsically motivated to ask my own question number 1.5, which was, why? Because, like I have the authority. I'm wearing a shirt that says Mark Kirk on it. I can ask this question now, and people would answer very honestly, assuming that that is question 2 on my list. And they would say, well, you're the first Muslim person I've ever met. And Muslims, we get terrible PR. Like the statistic is insane. Like for one instance that has Muslims viewed in a negative idea gets 97% more negative coverage, that of even North Korea. Like that is how bad we're portrayed in Western media. And I mean, I clearly like statistics, throwing them out if I know what the statistic is. Muslims make up of 25% of the global population. Do you know how much we make up of the US population? You can guess. It's okay.
Okay. So you're 25% of the world.
Mhm.
And so I would say, here we go. I'm going to really embarrass. Oh, this is like a Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
moment. We're Tucker Carlson. Dad, how many people live in Tehran? So I would say of the United States population, I'm going to guess.
Percent, yeah.
I'm going to guess 5%.
One.
Dang. Okay.
1.1% of the US population.
1%.
And
Come on. 1%.
1.1%, respectfully.
Okay, let's
And
come on. Let's get it correct.
And I only remind people of these statistics because to me, to contextualize, and this was 3 miles further north from my home in Skokie in Glenview, Illinois. So for me to be confronted with people who never met someone that looks like me before and is sharing that they actually fear what my demographic of people can do, there's this interesting degree of empathy that comes from that. You're like, without justifying ignorance, bigotry, and racism, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went back to my even intern office that day and told my friends how uncomfortable I was by this question. And they would say, well, Bushra, if you're the first Muslim they've met and their understanding of Muslims comes from the media, can you blame them?
That's a good point.
Not for me to answer if I can or can't, but and then I was challenged by my peers. Can you find me a positive example of a Muslim doing something good in the media? And it was very clear. We see this with every minority demographic, that anytime we're presented in the media, we're either the victims of violence or the perpetrators of violence. And anytime we can be presented as a hero, there's got to be a sob story marketed with it so we can be brought down 10 notches subconsciously before we can rise 5 in the eyes of others. And this is all just the way the news cycle works and how people consume media, and we perpetuate this constant narrative too.
Who's the we in that sentence?
The we is how we see stories go viral and sensationalized. It is the average consumer with our digital currency, with our likes, our comments, our shares, and the way that people see clickbait headlines and don't read the body. We, including myself and you.
Do you ever find yourself bowing to this sort of narrative about Muslims? Do you ever, as a Muslim woman, say, well, they got a point there? You know what I'm saying? Do you ever find yourself in a moment of like weakness?
No, never. Literally never. For me to have articulated this point about here is exactly where it comes from and why it comes from and what the statistics and the numbers are is because I genuinely wanted to understand it for myself to see if there was an inclination of any validity behind this. And I can with confidence say absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it comes to your point of what you were saying about, why are we so concerned about one country having a nuclear weapon as an obsession point when so many others do? It's because we have been created to be desensitized to the death of a Black and brown body, which is why when we see what's happening in Gaza, people are literally not comparing it. We're hearing, but X amount of this demographic is being, well, we're not. If you count numbers to numbers, this is not even an equal playing field. You are telling me that you view the death of a Black or brown body different than the death of one of its white counterpart. And that in its entirety is flawed. And all of this is connected in that way. And we've seen Netanyahu talking about Iran creating a nuclear bomb since 1995.
Yeah. No, it's like I said. Okay, well, you've raised 2 points. One, how Netanyahu has stroked this fear of Iran creating a bomb, and this has, yes, your entire life this has been going on because you're young. So 1995 is even before you were born. Since before you were born, okay, and it plays into these notions. Like the conventional fear is, well, Ben, I can hear the argument. Well, Ben, I've heard every argument in the world, Bushra. Every single argument you could possibly give on any issue, I've heard. Okay, and so Ben, what Iran funds terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, and they're going to give one of these terrorist groups the bomb. That can literally be said about any country. I'm against the bomb, but you know what I'm saying? Like, So that argument could be used for any country. And so I've never bought into it, but yes, we're bombarded with that argument all the time. You raised something else about, this is a tangent. I don't even know if I want to go here, because we've had this conversation many times. Shout out Mark Sims, guest on the show. When there's a murder, follow me on this, that crosses racial or ethnic bounds, that seems to generate much more anger, which is in itself a form of brainwashing. Mm-hmm. Bushra, if all murder is bad, why do Jewish people get more upset when Jewish people are killed in Israel? Why do Palestinian people get more upset when Palestinian people are killed in Gaza, et cetera? So you could go down the line. You could go down the list. Donald Trump, they make a big deal about 3 murders that immigrants have committed or been accused of committing. And completely say nothing about all the carnage that goes on in our country all the time, perpetrated by Americans against Americans. And this has been going on. This is part of the illogic that Tucker Carlson will never entertain. He'll never dive into that illogic. Do you follow what I'm saying? He'll dive into the illogic of Ted Cruz, and I appreciate him for that. But he won't dive into that illogic. So I understand exactly what you just said. And I realize this may be beyond being a congresswoman from the 9th Congressional District. You follow me? So how are you as a congresswoman going to entertain and confront all these strands of prejudice, bigotry, illogic, fear, etc.? Go ahead.
It's a great question. And I appreciate that you contextualize in this scheme of this is beyond what the scope of being in Congress entails, that for a candidate like me, I will uniquely be confronted with that perhaps other people of different demographics and counterparts may not. And to even on the word of perpetrators of violence and terrorism, one thing that I'll call out is I was volunteering at the 4th of July parade in Skokie when the shooting happened in Highland Park during the 4th of July parade. So we were one of the first people to be notified on the ground to cancel the parade. This was, again, 4 miles from where we were stationed. Yet no article called that man a terrorist. Yet what that was an act of terrorism. And that is why, to me, I take language incredibly seriously. I take the types of words that we use with a lot of weight, because this is how people get clickbait articles to sandwich you to be labeled as XYZ thing that they want to fit their decree and dichotomy. That being said, when ICE raids have been happening in Skokie even, right, since February, when we had a main pipe burst, a water pipe burst, streets were flooded, it was freezing that day, there was ice on the road. This happened in February, by the way. Same day, we had ICE going in to the halal, meaning Islamically blessed meat stores on Oakton Street in Skokie, walking into these Muslim-owned businesses, because when there's a distraction happening, that is when people take shield. So ICE is not new in our streets at all. This is not something that just happened a couple of weeks ago. This has been going on since the beginning of this administration, come early this January, late January. And I only say this to say that when I speak out about immigration, because it is not wrong the way that this is being handled, I get told to go back to my country when I was born and raised here. And that is an additional layer of element that I have to continue to be mindful of, that I have to triple dot my I's, double cross my T's to ensure I'm extra buttoned up and prepared, whereas mediocrity on another front will continue to be rewarded, whereas this is what the reality looks like. So I will not be the person to solve institutional racism, but I will hope that just me being in this congressional field race, and when I get elected, and the coalition that we are building, it's not just advocating for your own demographic. It's not just advocating for the people that look like you or that you're representing. It is building across multiple bridges and aisles to have allies, because that is the only way to get work done. And that's what I've championed even on the Board of Education. We were one of the first school districts that's turned into a use case around the country. We wanted to bring halal food options for our students, but I also made it sure it didn't start and stop there. So we brought halal, kosher, and vegetarian food options for our students, encompassing multiple different groups. And that is how we were able to testify in front of the Illinois General Assembly with partnership with the Muslim Civic Coalition as an example, and got it written into law by Governor Pritzker that every state-funded facility, schools, prisons, and hospitals have to provide halal, kosher, and vegetarian food options. So the coalition building.
Now, I applaud everything you just said, but I realize I live in a world far greater than people like me, and I am the minority. So everything you just said, if it was the Tucker Carlson show, he would roll his eyes, smirk, and go, "That is so woke, Bushra, so woke." Have you encountered anything, that kind of MAGA reaction, dismissive reaction, that somehow or other what you're doing is not legitimate? It's what's their little virtue signaling. I've learned their words. See, Tucky, I know more about you than you know about me. I actually listen to what you guys say. Okay, so have you had that kind of response from people in your area? Go ahead.
Never from a real person who lives in this district. And I say real person because people who hide behind screens with an American flag on an emoji as their profile picture on X or Facebook doesn't warrant a actual, who knows who's behind that, right? A lot of these bots users. Never has there been a real person during this tenure. I mean, over the years, there's been times like on public transit and such where people might say things just because of what I look like, but never have I been critiqued on what I am saying. Because I mean, what you kind of mentioned earlier, like you've heard every side of every argument. Same here, right? And I've been in these spaces, like as just even on the debate team in high school, like we were debating the surveillance on people of color in 2014, and now that same artificial intelligent technology has actually been created and actually been sold to ICE to spy on immigrants around this country. We were talking about it 10 plus years ago as a theory of things that we want to prevent from happening, and it is now happening.
Wait, so a tangent. 2,000 years ago, when I was in high school, I spent about a day or two on the debate team. It was way too much work, which for me.
It was.
But did they still do like resolve? Da 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 da. Did they still? Oh my God, they still resolve. We should.
It was we would, you got a resolution for the year, and that's what the theme and topic is around. And I did policy debate, meaning you have to speak as fast as you can in 8 minutes to read all your evidence out loud. And I sometimes find myself speaking incredibly fast because the debate mind gets activated and I have to remind myself to pause a little.
Yes, me too. Okay, it's not a debate mind. It's just like I talk fast. So I'm like, calm down, Ben. You got to take a deep breath and slow. Yeah, I do that all the time. All right, Niles North. Oh man, that's a diverse school. Okay, so Niles North. Let's see if I could do this, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so my Skokie schools. There's Niles West, which is Lincolnwood. Okay, I apologize, Skokie people. It's actually in Lincolnwood. And that is, if I recall, around Oakton, I want to say. Am I right about that? Is it? I'm doing this off the top of my memory here. My
Niles
Skokie
West.
schools.
Niles West is all the way down on Oakton Street. Niles North is across the street from Old Orchard Mall.
Yes, that's the one across the street from Old Orchard. Okay.
Yeah.
Old Orchard.
Yeah.
So talk about all the different kids at Niles North in the class of, what would you have been, 2016?
2016. It's so funny that you asked that, because this is a question I haven't been asked in this capacity in a really long time. So it's fun to reflect. So my friend group in high school, we were actually, people would jokingly say, like, you all are diversity. Like, you all are poster children of what Niles North would want to take a picture of and broadcast. But it wasn't a curated moment. Like, these are the people that we would take the bus with. My best friend in high school, she actually was my neighbor as well. White Irish Catholic. We jokingly say she helped assimilate me, because my family and I, we didn't grow up celebrate Thanksgiving. We would make Christmas cookies at her house. Like, I genuinely learned so much about American culture in a really cool way from her. Another person in our friend group who lived a block over, his last name was Moy, comes from two Chinese immigrant parents, and we're all still in touch today. And we actually had almost every demographic you could think of. We had people who identified as quote unquote redneck as well. And we would all sit in the back of the bus and yap and chat about all the different things. And that is what Niles North is. Niles North has 120 languages represented in that school alone. And even coming back to Illinois 9, the top 35% of people in Illinois 9 do not speak English as their primary language. And the top 3 languages that are spoken are Spanish, Polish, and Urdu, 2 of which I'm glad I can fluently speak. So Polish, I'm going to add to my list because I'm not there yet, but I'm going to learn a catchphrase for sure. And that is just it's not just Niles North, the high school in itself, and it's not just Skokie either, but it is all of Illinois 9. And even bringing it a step further, if we know information like that, then when you go for your government services in any elected person's office and you do not see these 3 languages at the minimum represented in either a worker who can help translate for you or coordinate, or in a Google translated pamphlet, what are we doing? That is an accessibility issue. So these types of words aren't just buzzwords, but here is what they mean and look like in practice too.
By the way, I applaud it 100%, but I could just hear Megan, that's woke. English is the only language that matters. When you hear that, what do you think?
What's there to think? When people say English is the only language that matters, to me, that enforces that the US, the way that we're taught the map growing up, we see the United States in the middle and we see Asia cut in half on both sides of the map. We are not in the center of this world, and we need to be reminded of that too, and to be team players and not meddle in other people's business, because it's only going to backfire on us as an institution. And that is what the response is. Like, we might teach our children that we're in the center of the world geographically, but we're not. And this perpetuation of that norm of English is the only language that matters does a disservice to all of the other people that make America actually great.
All right, I agree with you on that one. When I asked the question, I was ready to answer it myself because it's absurd. I'm utter envy of my friends who speak multiple languages. It's such idiocy. And I won't, one more time as I hit my theme, Tucker. You did that job of pointing out the illogic of Ted Cruz. He doesn't know anything about a country he wants to invade and topple. And you are part of a movement that disparages like the mental challenge, taking the mental challenge, Bushra, of learning another language, over like a serious, it's like disparaging someone for wanting to I don't know, learn how to swim or learn and run, and climb a tree. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's like, why you should be encouraging people to have that kind of diversity of brain. But no, you mock it and malign it. That's your movement. And sorry, I didn't come back to that theme. All right, you're on the school board in Skokie. Wow, I could talk education issues forever. And you want to go to Congress and be a congresswoman. And so taking your background as a kid who went to public schools, okay, in Skokie, went to Niles North High School in Skokie. And what will you do with that background if you go to Congress? I could go down a whole list of issues that are confronting. I'll just start with charter schools, one of my pet peeves. And feel free to disagree with me if you want, Bushra. But right now, MAGA on the issue of education is championing charter schools. They're picking up for your old friend Mark Kirk. It used to be. I remember him advocating for charter schools. What's your attitude about using public dollars to support privately run schools? Go ahead.
We need to prioritize using public dollars to fund public schools first and foremost. And the fact that our public school line item from federal funding is less than 10% and puts the burden on onus on property tax funding and local dollars means a school district like mine has disproportionately heavy tax burden on parents and families. And it's the reason why we're perpetuating this system of your zip code determines the access and the quality of education you receive. It all starts and ends with the fact that we don't get enough federal funding. We actually don't get enough state funding either. It's so hyper localized that this is why we're perpetuating these disproportionate systems. As far as charter schools go, there are some states where the charter school system is so institutionalized that it is actually equivalent to a public school model. You think about Florida, you think about the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. That is not a national scale that needs to be created at large in any other state in this country. And we have public education for this reason. And if we're not using public dollars to fund public education, there is no question of where else that should be being used. It has to start there.
So you would, if you were elected to Congress, you would use your power to make sure before a privately owned school gets federal dollars, we take care of our public schools. Am I correct in understanding that?
Absolutely. And it's a no-brainer. It's a point of logic as well. So the theme.
It's a no-brainer. I see it that way too, but a lot of people disagree with you on that one, Bushra. You're going to get some blowback on that one on the 9th congressional. Well, maybe not. I don't know.
I would say that there are a lot of people who oversee particularly private schools that are religious institutions, right? You think of schools that are either in a mosque, synagogue, temple, church, and the full-time students that are enrolled in those institutions. I don't consider that charter. I consider that, accredited private schooling that happens to have a religious tie, and that the fact that they get lumped into charter conversations, they're the people that are actually advocating for more resources in a way. But even that, I view them as entirely separate modes. But I could see that group of people.
So in other words, religious schools, you don't want to see them get public dollars either. Am I correct in that?
I think that there could still be a slight different conversation. That's why I say we need to separate those institutions from charter schools.
Why? Why would you give money, public dollars, to a privately run school just because it's got a religious theme to it?
Yeah, I don't think it should be public dollars by any means, but I can see a world where there is still a creation of whether they be grants on an application basis based on the demographic needs that those institutions serve from an access standpoint. Meaning if there are students that are low income that are enrolled in these schools because parents see that there is a religious element that needs to be represented, people that can afford to send their kids to charter schools, an example, do not ever need any type of public dollars, funds, or usage in that way. I could see a lane in a world where that slightly might be a thing, but either way, that would be state funded. It would not be federal funded.
All right. Well, I don't know. That's a slippery slope, as they say. I remember there was a bill. You probably know about this bill because you're in a board of education in Skokie. I forget the name of it. But they follow me on this one. We talked about this in the show, listeners. You remember this. I'm doing this from memory. So they wanted to give a tax credit to people who donated to a fund, and the fund would be used to create scholarships to help poor kids from low-income backgrounds pay, or their parents pay the tuition at private schools. And and my attitude about the whole thing was, well, if you're a well-to-do person and you want to fund some child's education because you think it's unfair that they can't afford to pay the tuition at, I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever school, Lat, Park, or whatever, or, Loyola, a Catholic school, or Fenwick. I'm running out of schools here. But anyway, if you want to do that, go do it. Why you need a handout from the state? If you believe in your heart of hearts that this is the thing to do to help a kid, what do you need to just do it? You got all kinds of money, so what do you need the handout for? Go ahead, answer that question.
I think that's why I said it should be a formalized grant case by case. It does not need to be a net program that is all encompassing that every school can have access and dip their toes into.
All right, fair enough. We'll move on from that one. And here's the other issue that I would love to hear your thoughts on. I see we're running out of time, so you can come back anytime, Bushra.
Thank you.
And we'll pick up the conversation. There was the shooting that occurred. I lost track of time. That was last week in Minnesota, where the House Speaker and her husband were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much violence in our country right now,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much open hate. You talked about it a little bit about the responses from the robots on social media. The response in the aftermath of that murder from the senator from Utah, Mike Lee, was disgusting. I don't know if you saw this. I know a lot of my listeners have texted me about it, where he blamed it on Marxism. I don't know what. Again, hey, Tucker, we need your help here. We need your help. Illogic of your brethren, okay? Guy wasn't a Marxist. Had nothing to do with Marx. Come on, Tucker. Now that you're done with Ted Cruz, go take on Mike Lee. And so you're going, like, in some ways, you're going right in the belly of the beast. They're like, you'll be a target. And I'm not saying this to make you scared, but you notice. I know your parents must be telling you this too.
Yeah.
Just the way you look, okay? You're going to be a target.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll always have I'll always have your back on something, but the world is not like me, okay? And so why don't you talk a little bit about like whatever fears you might have, or the challenges that this poses, or your thoughts on this general subject of so much violence being generated and directed at people, politicians like yourself. Go ahead.
I'd be lying if I said it wasn't the biggest consideration, maybe after how much it takes to fundraise, about whether it makes sense to run or not. It neck and neck with that, right? One is like a practicality from a resource standpoint of what it takes to fiscally run. And then the other is a mental thought and fear from a safety perspective of physically what it takes to run. And even apart from the violence and apart from the scrutiny, the real actual issue at hand is these special interest groups that will get involved in this race. If they cannot find whatever dirt they want on me, they will make stuff up. And that becomes a reputational damage too, that no one is resilient enough for to start, right? Comes over time, but not to make this a brouhaha conversation, but faith within myself, faith within the people I'm connected with, faith within what it means to run as a responsibility is what keeps me going. And I keep reminding myself that the two things that I personally can control are my intentions and my effort. And fear is used to cripple people to not take action. And I will not let fear do that to me.
And the other aspect that you mentioned, fundraising. Man, I couldn't do it. I just, getting on a phone and asking, well, I got issues anyway, but you're asking anybody to do anything. Not to make you my therapist, but how are you going to raise, how much money does it cost? You're up against Danny Biss, got some money. He's been doing this forever. He's been sending out emails. I get them every day. Hi, I'm Dan Biss. Give me money. So how are you going to compete with that?
It's not even, I would be lying if I said I plan on out fundraising anyone in this race, but it's about how you use that dollar. I know my dollar can be stretched in a much different way. You look at the website of at least 3 people in this race, it's built by the same group, Run. And you can look at what a quote costs to get a website made by then. Mine was built for $200 by my friend and I. A campaign ad, like my launch video that I made, I got quotes for 40 grand to get a video like that. My friend who worked on my documentary for PBS back in 2018 did it for $1 grand. And I wrote and directed the script. So it's not even about fundraising to blow money into the abyss and never see it again. It's being intentional with public use dollars, because to me, that is part of the responsibility with fundraising.
That was not a pun when she said blow into the abyss.
Yeah,
Sorry, that was
it
really
wasn't.
lame.
It wasn't. I swear.
It
Right
was
now,
lame on my part. Really lame. So you think by being uh, less wasteful and less extravagant, you can compete?
absolutely, absolutely, and that still will take at least $1 million. By the way, respectfully.
$1 million?
Yeah.
How are you going to raise $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to have at least 200 by the end of this month, which again, like we're talking numbers. There's people in this race who said they did that in their first day with collecting pledges before announcing, right? But again, like that's about 200,000 is also the cost of one TV ad. I've spent my entire professional corporate career competitive selling TV to digital ad buying. There are certain things that might not need to be spent, and also the consistency and support and endorsements from real people in this community that people will spend thousands and close to millions in trying to buy can only be earned. And I'm grateful
And
to have had that backing too.
at the risk of sounding totally and utterly naive, and I'm embarrassed to even ask the question, is there any more door knocking when you're running for Congress? Like I mentioned Moise before, when he ran for alderman, he was knocking on every door in the world.
Yeah.
Do you do that, or is Congress just the district too big for that
I
kind
mean,
of?
the district is massive, but absolutely field operations will be everything in a race like this too. And it wouldn't be a solo effort. That's where volunteers come in. And we have a ton of micro ambassadors within every neighborhood and area within this district, at least 3 to 5 parts of Evanston, even stretching to Crystal Lake, that are ready to spearhead those efforts. But solo, it would be close. I mean, unless you're just knocking on every registered voter slash previous primary voter, I do think there is a world where that's totally possible with a lot of grit and resilience. But the entire universe, all hands on deck.
Wow. And so this will help me when I ask this question.
Yeah.
Which town in the ninth congressional has the most people in the ninth congressional? If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which town is sort of the number one population
Yeah.
part ninth? Go ahead.
That's a really good question. So just for context, like Skokie, for example, has a population of 90,000 people. Lincolnwood has a population of 11,000 people. And the borders, I think anyone who does not live in either of these areas would not be able to tell you where and why that border is. So can't comment or confirm of what the exact place with the largest population is, but I do know that there's an inverse relationship with large population doesn't necessarily mean largest voter base as well.
So where's Evanston in all this?
I'm sure Evanston, I don't know Evanston's population on the top of my head right now.
That's a Tucker Carlson question. He will know.
Yeah.
I believe, don't quote me, it's like 71 or I don't know what it is. It's been a long time. So
Yeah.
Evanston, so Skokie and Lincolnwood combined have more voters in the ninth congressional than Evanston.
Yeah. So actually, I looked it up for you. Evanston, 75,000 people. Skokie's at a little under 90. So Skokie's larger than Evanston from people to people, which I'm not surprised by.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised by that. All right, I'm going to let you go. But before I do, you get the closing statement, if you will. Anything that you haven't said about yourself that you want people to know, or if you want people to be able to reach you, how do they reach you? Go ahead.
That's a great. Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to have been here today, and appreciate for everyone who stuck it out with Ben and I to listen. I know Ben can hold the fort down, but I don't know if I solo could have on this show today. So thanks for being here. I've actually ran countywide in this district before. I ran for the Cook County Board of Commissioners back in the day and won multiple precincts against an incumbent in Niles Township in the 50th Ward with literally nothing. So yes, there is a lot more we can talk about, and I'm excited to re-enter this race with a lot more access to resources and human relationships and capital. That being said, my website's bushraforcongress.com. I'm Bushra Amiwala on all socials. You're welcome to email me, info@Bushra for Congress. There's a contact form there. And I would love to stay close and connected with everyone. And thank you again for listening.
Thank you very much, Bushra. And that's Bushra, although you'll see the name spelled on the show. So I don't know why I spelled it. It's just the old baby boomer thing. All right, Bushra, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on the show. Talk to you soon, all right?
Thank you.
And I also want to thank producer Chris. He does an outstanding job. I know Bushra agrees with me to say, hey, producer Chris, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody.